BDGE Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast. As always, I am joined with Mr. Adam, Mr. Andrew, and today we are finishing off our top 24, top 30 rankings debate. We did the running back episode already. We will link that down below. Here's the wide receivers. And as always, for y'all that are listening via podcast, we have a lot of pictures up on the screen, a lot of stuff on the screen that you might want to just take a gander at if you are only an audio listener. So basically, we've got our consensus. We've all done our dynasty rankings available on bdg.co. Become a big dog member. And we're going to talk about some of the guys that we have the biggest gaps in. And I think this is a fun position in terms of like the differences here, because with running backs, this class in particular was not really super high as it relates to rookies. But with the receivers, obviously this is a great receiver class, which I think starts to make more polarizing rankings, right? Like you see the guys like Marv, and you got Rome, and you got Malik, and like that's where it's like almost a battle of, man, I love this dude so much, I'm just going to keep moving him up a spot and keep moving him up a spot. So I look at the top, 24, the top 30, we've got a ton of rookies just in the mix here. So there's a lot to talk about today. The first thing that jumps off, we all got J. Jeff 1. We all got CD 2. We all got Chase 3. We all got Amon-Ra 4. We got Marv at 5.
I'll be honest, I was surprised to see this type of continuity. Not that the 5 shouldn't be this way. I mean, nobody had the stones, including myself, to put CD at 1, huh?
No, I don't.
Because it would be wrong.
It's not about stones. Yeah. I just think Justin Jefferson's probably the greatest receiver of our generation.
That's fair. I know y'all don't have the stones. I get it. No, I mean
you didn't either.
No, well, I think there's a real conversation. I have him at 2. A lot of my ranking at him at 2 is because of the market sentiment. Realistically, I think that though Jefferson, you talked about on the running backs, where JJ McCarthy, the quarterback, like is not secure there at all. CD got peppered, absolutely fucking peppered with targets, and is really talented in his own right.
It's a difference between a redraft and dynasty. If you want to take CD as the redraft one over Jefferson, I actually don't know if anyone has Jefferson over CD in redraft. And if you're talking about just a 1-year sprint, that makes sense. But I think like Jefferson's just Jeff for him.
Why? But I guess not that don't have a good point. I'm just saying 24 and 25 years old, like what's really the difference in the long-term outlook if we're saying that the redraft is so clear?
I almost feel like Jefferson at this point is just like a vibe pick. Like you just can't fade him as the best wide receiver that we've seen in a long time.
I will also
to that point, that's why I haven't won. I think the market's reflective of it too.
Yeah.
With multiple quarterbacks that were not Kirk Cousins last year, Justin Jefferson still performed at an elite level. So he is quarterback proof. So even if we do think that the Minnesota Vikings are in 2024 going to have a tier down from what Kirk Cousins was into J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold, he's still going to perform.
I will say, though, I wouldn't put it – like, obviously, anything could really happen. Like, Amon-Ra can go for 1,800 this year, and people want him as the one. It wouldn't surprise me. Like, I look at Dallas, and they're so set up to be just, like, a super heavy passing team. If CD went for another 1,700, 1,800, and J.J. McCarthy's just like mediocre, Sam Darnold's mediocre, and Jefferson goes for 12, 1,300 this year and 8 touchdowns, those two will probably flip by next year.
I mean, if I was drafting and I knew I couldn't trade a lot in the league, or as a new league I wasn't sure, the tale of two, like before and after the bye for CD Lamb, if CD Lamb's season after the bye was a full extrapolation, I don't think we're even having the conversation, frankly.
Yeah, we're probably going to get that season this year. I think they just tried to make Tony Pollard like their identity in the first half of last year, and we're clearly like Tony Pollard's worse than Tajay Spears, so we're not going to try that second half of the year, and now it became the CD show.
Can I, like, just for context, 9 targets twice, the lowest he had post-bye, 14, 16, 14, 7. I mean, absolutely goon targets. Yeah. Insane.
Those sound like Justin Jefferson target numbers.
Steroids.
Yeah, I mean, CD I think is the one. Maybe I think you could have the debate for redraft like Tyreek Hill or CD, whatever the case may be. But I mean, listen, neither of these guys are going to lose your leagues. Neither of these guys are going to be upset with having on your dynasty team for a long time to come. What I'm more interested in talking about is our 6th ranked player. I got Garrett Wilson at 6. You got him at 10. You got Malik Neighbors at 6. He's got him at 11. So this is where that first like rookie conversation happens.
I got AJ Brown at 6.
Yep. Talk about Malik a little bit, why you have him all the way up there. It's just more of like we just are pretty confident that he'll be here next year, so let's just get ahead of the field.
Here's my thing, frankly, to this, right? Garrett Wilson, you got him at 6. Paint me the picture that over the next year or 2 years, which is what Garrett Wilson is now, where we don't give the exact same fucking story for Malik Neighbors.
I mean, Garrett Wilson just had about 170 targets from awful QBs, so if we get 170 from Aaron Rodgers, I could see him exploding into that Stephon Diggs.
Oh no.
prime.
Correct. I think Wilson's definitely in the position with Rodgers to make the leap. My point is the Garrett Wilson scenario the last 2 years is I think what Malik Neighbors is set up to give that's going to be the same picture that we paint for him with success or not.
Gotcha.
And I'm valuing bake that. Plus, I think he's even a little bit more talented than Garrett Wilson, although they're splitting hairs, and he's younger. That's the reason I have him there.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like I think the reason I have Wilson is Wilson's very young too, and I still think like Wilson will. We're talking about right now into the future. Malik, love him as a talent, of course. I'm not confident that he really produces at a high level this year. I don't know that I'm confident that he produces at a super high level with Daniel Jones under center. Sure. Now, what your level of high, or what your conversation of high level is sure. Like if he goes for 800 yards this year, obviously he's not a fantasy needle mover for you. If he takes a step up from that and goes for like 1,100 yards in year 2, also not a needle mover for you. Where Garrett Wilson, based off of what he did last year, I'm confident he'll have the same opportunity with Aaron Rodgers there this upcoming year. So, like, I feel like Garrett Wilson could actually legitimately be a needle-moving wide receiver this year.
So, to that, what's that?
I was going to say, I agree. He can be one of those dominant wide receiver ones this year.
I think what's interesting and where my ranking is, as I agree, I think Malik Neighbors, to me, I have him at 6. I think there's a lot of value insulation and excuses baked in where he's, like, regardless of production, going to probably trade in this type of range. Not necessarily 6, but somewhere between 6 and 12. Garrett Wilson, to me, everything you just painted, when I look and think about it, Garrett Wilson's on the clock in my estimation.
Okay, that's fair.
Garrett Wilson is time now for the excuses to go the fuck away, and it's time for you to dial in as far as Rodgers better be healthy, and we want to see all these targets mean something. I think him and Drake London, I could see a scenario where they could just ball out and jump really close to that Marv tier, right? Get into that elite tier, but we got to start seeing it. I think the excuses are going to start going away.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, and I think that's a great point you brought up because, like, with Garrett Wilson, I feel like I've seen enough where I'm not making excuses for him. I thought he did everything he could with the opportunities he got.
Agreed.
Drake London, I'm way lower on than consensus because I think there's more of that, like, it's time to see it from Drake London because he's had bright spots. I don't think he's made the most of his opportunity every time he's got it. So I'm a little bit less, like, bullish on the fact that, once he gets a quarterback, he's for sure a wide receiver 1, a top 10, a top 8 dynasty guy. Whereas Wilson, I feel like he literally squeezed out every drop of juice he had last year from the opportunities that he got, the shitty quarterback play. So with Wilson, I mean, he was separating, he was breaking huge plays, he was catching any ball coming his way. Like I thought he did everything he could last year. Drake London obviously didn't get as many opportunities, but I didn't see the upside from London that I saw from Wilson.
I don't actually have any disagreement with that. My point is more so that, like, Garrett Wilson, while that is true,
Wilson's on the clock where Neighbors is not.
Yeah, and it's time for him to produce because despite everything he tried to squeeze out of that situation, I don't think, wide receiver 40 in points per game.
Who?
Garrett Wilson.
Really? What were his finishing stats? He didn't score a lot of touchdowns, I'm assuming.
He was
40
in points per game?
He has 1,042 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Okay.
So that's like...
That makes sense. I mean, how many touchdowns did Jets throw for last year? Like fucking 14.
Yeah, those and the ones to Brees.
Yeah, and listen, like
where did you get 40 from?
I'm pulling season average stats in just one of my leagues. Now this is a half PPR league, but
okay. Because I pulled those numbers and I had him as 32nd. I was just wondering if I had bad data, but I pulled from player profile.
So I mean, that was half PPR, so maybe it's the point is even if it's not 40, it's outside of the range of meaning anything. So I think that. My point was really more so with Garrett Wilson, where I think something is going to happen with the value, big time. Like they're just if he comes out and smashes, the targets are there. The situation is here for him to take off. But if it doesn't amount to points per game, I think the impatience is going to start to kick in. Which that's where my ranking is polarizing relative to your guys'. And I get it from both sides. I really do.
I'm curious why you guys. To me, A.J. Brown is the clear number 6. Like, he feels like the clear number 6.
Okay.
And so I'm wondering...
How so? Or why, I guess. Yeah, just tell us.
I think from a production standpoint, like, let me just pull this right here. 17 fantasy points per game last year, and that was, like, missing some games and having some games where he didn't play, like, the full entire season. Like, 8th overall from fantasy points per game standpoint. It just feels like nothing has changed. Jalen Hurts is still going to be the quarterback. They're still going to do what they're going to do. He just got an extension, right? Like, it just feels like he should be number 6. I feel like he's undervalued in the community because most people are not putting him here. But I just don't, when I look at the data and I look at the information, I don't understand why we are fading him.
It's super fair. AJ Brown's like a tough one because I think he's almost like the JT of wide receivers, where it's like we're penalizing him for age, even though he's not old.
He's 26.
But it's only because the guys above him that are so elite are just really young. I think he's kind of in that mold where it's like probably shouldn't be lower, but you're almost just like, okay, he's younger or he's older, so we're just gonna like put him below the other guys because we think those other guys are just as talented as he is.
Do we think anything's changing with AJ?
Well, I mean, here's what I'll say. Like with AJ Brown, one, the community, now I don't disagree with you from a production standpoint, okay, but the community does not agree with your sentiment.
I know.
But why though? I want you to just think through the process of why, and then this is why I don't have him as a clear 6, regardless of while your points are correct about production.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm asking. I'm saying, why is he not the clear 6?
After the bye, the production was not actually what you're talking about, first of all, about A.J. Brown.
This is also about the time where he was missing some time, right? Towards the back half of the season, that's when he was missing time?
I mean, he only missed – actually, he didn't miss any time. Week 18, he only played 18% of the snaps.
And in the playoffs, that he missed time too.
Yeah, but I mean, he played 95 to 94% of the snaps weeks 11 through 17. But he was wide receiver 92, 26, 14, 22, 37, 31, 44. And here's the thing about it, right? You saw Devontae Smith, who also got bagged, actually playing a lot better. People do forget, and it's amazing to me, to the point of production. He had 6 games of 130 yards in a row, which is outrageous.
For AJ?
Yeah. But, like, the point is, okay.
He was CD over the first half of the year, and then CD became CD over second.
Recency bias. But, like, if you're at this age, the knees and people being worried about him getting hurt, as well as the fact that he didn't actually produce in the back half of the season. So, for him, and this is something I talk about in Dynasty, where the youth – while I think it's a lot of times incorrect that we value you so much, the problem with the aging guys is you have one thing. A.J. Brown has to produce at elite level the entire time. There is no time off. There is no otherwise, this is what the community does. They freak out.
It feels insane, and especially because when we say with the age, and we're talking about a guy who's 26 at a wide receiver position.
Well, he's going to be 27 during the season.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, 29, y'all tell me at 29, Amari Cooper's old as shit. Like, it's not that insane.
Do you think any of the A.J. Brown, this would be dumb, I guess, because he's produced over the last 2 years, you think any of it is like kind of the market cooling off on like Jalen Hurts maybe developing into elite passing quarterback?
That's got to be part of it, because in that same sentence, Jalen Hurts is being faded this offseason as well.
Right, because I think some of the insulation with A.J. Brown is like Jalen Hurts has improved year in and year out. He's just going to keep going from like 3,300 yards to 36 to 42, and now he's kind of stagnated at that like 3,500-yard mark for passing.
But in the same breath, Jalen Hurts, when you talk about fantasy points per game last year and numbers and stuff like that, like in the same conversation as Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, like he's
right, but he doesn't do it
level.
through the like the fantasy points per game doesn't matter for A.J. Brown.
But when you're throwing A.J. Brown 130 yards for 6 games straight to start the year, and
I'm not saying it's affected A.J. Brown. Like, he's still producing at that level, but I wonder if it's because people have stagnated on Jalen Hurts' progression that has now like filtered into the way that we're feeling about A.J. Brown.
I just think too, there's a piece of it too where it's, listen, these guys are all great in the top 10, but I didn't go through all of them. But I'm gonna venture to say, while playing almost 100% of the snaps and on the field the whole time, none of these guys were as low as, like, A.J. Brown finished for a week wide receiver 92. Like, that's red flag for people in Dynasty, I think. When you are that old and you have weeks like that, he's crying a lot of times. There's a lot of stuff that is probably just noise, but it's being baked into his
That's
cost.
what I think. Yeah, I think it's noise, because I'll be honest.
But it's also,
that feels crazy.
It's
He's
also not
way too talented for that type of low volume noise to be a thing.
But it's also like, how many wide receivers like him, valued like him, are going to play the whole game and be wide receiver 92?
You think people will remember that at all? Like, I don't.
If it was flip flop, no. If A.J. Brown started slow and had a great, he finished the season with 6 weeks of 130 yards, no. But the recency bias lingers. Is I think why.
Yeah, I'm just saying, and we could look at, like, you don't even have to just look at last year. You can look at the year before. Like, he's been productive. This isn't just like last year he was productive for 6 weeks and then he kind of had a down second half of the year. No, he's been productive. He's always been productive ever since he's linked up with Jalen.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's like Hurts is stagnated, but A.J. Brown has been still tremendous.
Yeah,
you know?
And so it's just, I don't know, because I want to say he's like wide receiver 8 or 9 on Keep Trade Cut.
He's 8 right now.
8. And it's like you're getting him fairly good value, like third round in startup drafts sometimes. And it's like, we're getting a guy who can be an elite wide receiver 1 most weeks.
Well, but here's, I guess, the question, though. for me, right? And because there's two sides of it. A.J. Brown's kind of sandwiched in the middle with the age and the production. If you want to just go production in a shorter window, I'll take the Tyreek Hill bet. If you want to go the youth route, you could go, Malik Neighbors all the way to one extreme, or you could do the middling play of Garrett Wilson, where he's still really young but could probably produce what A.J. Brown could if he has Aaron Rodgers there. So I think that's also part of why it's not as clear-cut for the community at 6. Although I have him at 7. I'm not actually saying that it's I don't have him outrageously undervalued. I just think that there's other conversations where in Dynasty, playing for the long haul, that's, I think, what is baked in.
I hear you. I think for me, the more so reason why I say why is it not as clear-cut is because when I am looking at the number 6, and I'm looking at some of these other guys, like we've talked about Garrett Wilson. We haven't talked about Puka Nacua, but we can put him in that tier as well.
Sure.
Like, it's a guy that we've seen do this time and time and time again at an elite level, and then guys that we've seen either flash or hope to take that next step into the next level. And it's like, if I'm going to rank these guys and it's the order of which I'm going to take them in a startup, give me the guy who keeps doing it and has done it and is 26 years old and can do it for 3 more years or 4 more years, and then we can still keep having this conversation.
Yeah, I get you. We don't have to talk it into oblivion. I just think the other thing to remember with him is if the market's cooled on him to this point, what if he actually does slow down for a bigger point? What if he does get hurt? The market, I think, on him is what is a little scary. But I agree with a lot of your points.
Yeah. I mean, the older you get, just like the less leash you have as a player in Dynasty.
I'm going to segue this also to a Puka Nacua conversation because say Puka Nacua goes out this year and he has a mediocre season. Like, his market could tumble pretty far as well.
He has the biggest value retention issue in the top 10, I would say, almost factually.
Without a doubt. Like, the more I think about it, and I put him at 7, and I feel like I've been not anti-Puka, but like I haven't been someone who's trying to buy him in Dynasty. Mm-hmm. I think, and you could make this argument with pretty much any wide receiver or whatever. If Matt Stafford tomorrow comes out and retires, like, what the fuck do we think about Puka?
It would be very interesting.
A lot.
I mean, obviously, I think the high-end range of upside for Puka is definitely somewhat attached to Stafford. The interesting part about that is, like, I also don't know how bad it would get for him. Like, realistically, his production was so insane, and it was it's not just the draft capital, but like people, the amount of targets he earned. It's hard to really quantify something that outlierish.
Yeah.
But I think the thing for Puka is this: the value retention, to your point, is 100% scary. But if you look at the number 4 receiver for us, clearly the path is if he can continue it. If Matt Stafford does stay healthy for a year and he has it again, what's separating those two guys? That it's both ends of the coin, I think.
Is there any world where because I think we'd all agree if pretty much any wide receiver ever who was picked inside like the top 2 rounds had the rookie year that Puka had, they would pretty much be like the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty for like 2 years, right? Like, we think about like Juju, we think about Odell, and obviously the second half for Juju, whatever. Think about like some of the elite rookie seasons over the last decade or so. Like, that has cemented those players as top 5, top 3, usually top 2 Dynasty assets. Like, in order for Puka to break into that tier of Jefferson, Lamb, Chase, Brown, he has to do what he did again last year, this year, right?
Correct, yep.
And to go back into like that target conversation, the first 2 games of Puka Nacua's career, he had 35 targets in 2 games where Cooper Kupp didn't play a game.
Crazy.
So, like, you also got to look at the second half of the year where Cooper Kupp was banged up the majority of the year, and I think that is not being accounted for by the community as much as it probably should be, is that Cooper Kupp is maybe not as washed as people think he is, and maybe he was more so hurt last year. And if that is the case, does Stafford go back to Cooper Kupp as the number 1 option? And we saw that happen down the stretch last year because you look at the targets for Puka Nacua.
I would probably fight you on that. He was still the alpha in the offense over
You go 15, 20, 10, 11, 12, all in the first half of the season, and then down the stretch you have 7, 7, 8, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6.
11,
like
8.
11,
I mean,
one
he's
game.
Still, okay, but all right, to the point, sure. Now, 35 targets, 15 and 20 targets is not like something that anybody's replicating, right? But he's still, my point is when Cooper Kupp came on the field, he still was earning the majority of the targets. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is good enough to still eat into the targets.
Yeah.
But for a guy of his stature to get, after the bye, the rapport that Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford had, the breakfast boys, he's getting the number 1 targets there. 15 and 20 targets is unsustainable for anyone not named CD probably. So
it's insane because I think throughout the first 7 weeks last year, Puka Nacua, he had 5 top 10 finishes at the position. And then you go the back half of the year, 3 of them.
Top what? 10?
Top 10.
Yeah, he had 3, and he also had a wide receiver 13. And then don't forget in the playoffs, a $181 and a touchdown.
We don't play fantasy football in the playoffs.
I'm just saying you got to bake that into Puka's proving to be
I guess the question might be like, what's if he's going as the wide receiver 7, right? Like,
and don't hear what I'm not saying. I don't hate Puka. I have him as 8.
Can I ask what do you mean by don't hear what you're not saying?
It means like don't like theorize about.
Like, I'm talking negatively about some things for Puka Nakua's profile, but I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm not saying that I don't like Puka Nakua.
You're saying don't misconstrue
Okay,
your
at wide
words.
receiver 7, I guess like the question maybe you have to ask is because you have to draft him there. What is more likely to happen? Him move up in value or him move down in value after this year?
Down.
I would agree with that. So there's a part of me that feels like, and listen, if he has the same year again, his value will go up. But there's a part of me that feels like there's a little bit of like drafting him at his ceiling, where I look at Garrett Wilson and I'm like, I think Wilson can jump up into that top tier. I think those guys being drafted there, Malik Neighbors could eventually get into there. Puka feels like of the top 10 guys, he's kind of the one that I feel without a doubt the most hesitant to be like, I think he'll be in that Jefferson Lamb Chase tier anytime soon.
I think, well, to the point you made, I think it's a great point. What's more likely, up or down? I mean, let's just call it what it is. He's already an outlier. So betting on him is betting on an outlier. It's range of outcomes. If you were to do this multiple times in a row, it's not the right process.
Yeah.
But I think the real answer to the question, if Matt Stafford is healthy, mind you, he did that. He had that season while Matt Stafford didn't play the entire time.
How many games did Stafford miss?
Remember, he missed a handful, I think, right? When he was
still led that team to be a playoff team, though.
My only point is that, like, if Matt Stafford ranges of outcomes, if Matt Stafford played the entire time, he might have had a better season. Or this year, if he plays the entire time, he could end up having a better season. I think there is a range of outcomes for him to go up. I think the ceiling for him, though, Nick, is look at Amon-Ra St. Brown. He got paid, and he's realistically produced like Jamar Chase Jefferson, but we're not going
He's outproduced Jamar Chase.
Right, but we're not going to push him past these guys because of the draft capital. So I think the ceiling is Amon-Ra. I think to your point, Nick, yes, it's probably more likely that he goes down, and I think there's going to be a lot of value loss if he doesn't replicate really good numbers. So I'm hesitant. I'm the lowest at 9, but I think there's a pretty reasonable tier here for me, and there's a lot of different types of bets in this range.
What does the Puka Nakua season look like that prevents him from falling? What does he have to do to prevent himself from falling?
He's got to produce again
1,100?
More than that.
1,200?
I think it's going to have to be a top 10
fantasy season?
Yeah, top 10, top 12 fantasy season. He's got to be a wide receiver 1 again.
If he's not a wide receiver 1, he's plumbing.
He's not a wide receiver 1. He's not sticking around at the wide receiver 7 or 8 ranking. Not with guys like Neighbors and Rome and A.J. Brown and Wilson like on his heels.
Potentially a London and some of these other guys.
Yeah. There's not even really much more to add. I think if he's a wide receiver 1 again, he probably treads water. If he finishes in this 1,400 yards again, though, he's a top 5 wide receiver, he definitely can go up. But the problem is there's a lot of things that have to stay going right.
That feels, and that's what I was going to get to, because I'm like, that feels like an asset, although we do have him ranked as a top 10 guy, a top 8 guy right now, 9 guy. I guess we have him 8. I don't necessarily want to draft that asset on my roster at that ranking, which makes me wonder, are we confident that he's number 8 if all of us are saying that maybe we don't like the value here?
I mean, well, here's I think reality. Malik Neighbors, there's such a small scenario where people view him terribly after this year because he's going in a situation where we don't expect a lot.
Yeah.
Puka Nakua, though, you made a case for A.J. Brown that he's clearly 6, and that's based on production. Puka Nakua, what story has he told you so far that he can't produce?
Okay.
Nothing yet.
Here's one.
I also did say, though, with A.J. that we've seen it time and time and time again. So that's kind of what I need for Puka.
Anyone remember what Jalen Waddle's startup price was last year, going into last year?
Not sure.
Yeah, he's like wide receiver 13, 15.
Really?
Yeah. People have been very high on him. He's by the way, he's our consensus 15.
That feels really low. Going into last year?
Yeah. I want to say in that range, maybe.
Okay. I was going to say, so Jalen Waddle had 1,000 as a rookie, jumped up to 1,300 as a sophomore.
I could be low on that.
And then last year he went back down to 1,000. So you're talking about a guy who went to 1,300. So you progressed 2 years in a row. You're a top 10 draft pick on a pretty good offense. And he put up 1,000 yards And now I guess it's not that big of a fall off because we have him at 15. But I assumed coming off of a sophomore year of 1,300 yards that he was up at like 8 to 10.
And
Well,
it was
I think
because
he was
Tyreek Hill came to town.
That was
Yeah.
exactly the thing. The presence of Tyreek Hill, I think, was what was pushing his dynasty value a little bit down. If
makes
it
sense.
was him again with that 140 type target volume and just being the one, I think you'd be looking at him in the
Garrett
tier
Wilson
of,
tier.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I guess I'm just saying like if Cooper Kupp has a bounce back year in a sense, it doesn't even need to be a huge bounce back year.
Yeah.
But Puka drops down from however many yards he had down to 1,000, 1,100. I think we could see him drop from wide receiver 8 down to 13, 14, 15.
Sure.
Yeah, because he had 1480 last year.
Yeah, he balled.
Yeah, 1480 and only 6 touchdowns. Like it wasn't like a ton of touchdowns
The
either.
thing about Puka, though, Nick, I think the final point I'll say, just to kind of summarize, we talk about A.J. Brown. He's at the age where it's weird because you have to produce at that age. Mm-hmm. The wild part about Puka is he's not at that age, but he's on the same timeline because of the draft capital. He's young, but he has to produce in order to keep the value.
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
And then I'll just tell you this. I can't put Tyreek Hill. I can't put him anywhere past 8, man. I know it's for a year or two, but this is a guy that's just ridiculously league winning potential.
I just kept looking at the age, and I'm like, man, this doesn't feel great. But then you look at the fantasy points per game and some of the other stuff, and I'm like, same as you. I wasn't 8 for me, but it was 9, and I was like, I just can't push him down anymore.
Tyreek just scares me about like it doesn't feel like he's going to retire when his body breaks down. It feels like he's going to retire just
Mentally check out?
because he just wants to.
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to talk about Puka and translates into Tyreek is if we think Puka is already a value that could trend down without production, why not go with Tyreek Hill?
I have them one apart.
That's my case. I know he's old, and he's definitely going to go down because he's old, but if I'm going to bet on production 1 for 1, I'll take Tyreek Hill over Puka Nacua.
Yeah, because the only other guy who outproduced Tyreek last year was CeeDee Lamb.
For sure. I mean, right now, this time of year, too, just look at everybody in that range. A.J. Brown, we're talking about being old at 26, so that's why Tyreek Hill is not insanely valued, but he's the outlier for the age range in this. Everybody else in this age range, look, there's no one even close to 30 here at all.
No. We got Tyreek at 10, Rome at 11, Drake London at 12, Olave at 13, Ayuk 14, Waddle 15, Devontae 16,
Yep.
Pittman 17, DJ Moore 18, Nico 19, DK at 20, Zay 21, Higgins at 22, Tank Dell 23, and Pickens at 24. Woo. Okay, so we don't have a ton of like huge discrepancy down that entire list. I guess maybe working our way back up. George Pickens, we have an 11 spot difference, and I kind of laid my case for this a week or two ago when we had a conversation about Pickens, and Pickens came into the league really young. He produced right away as a rookie, 800, 900 yards, then followed it up last year, 1,100 yards. We get rid of Deontay Johnson and his 150 targets a year, bring in hopefully a stable QB, whether that's Russ or Justin Fields. I think both of them kind of latch on to their wide receiver 1. So I see another really productive year. And if you're talking about 3 straight productive years to start your career at 23, 24 years old, I feel like you got a pretty fucking good dynasty asset on your hands.
And
Yep, that's fair.
the number 1 target in the offense is Left Town.
I already said that, but
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
sorry, I was zoned out.
No, you're good.
take a nap over there.
My bad.
There's a lot of strong cases to be made
Is this just like you don't like Pickens as a player?
honestly,
You didn't like the draft video? The NBA young boy?
Nah, I love that. I actually was more of a defender of Pickens coming out as a rookie. I just think this is the case of, in this offense, this is kind of an offense to the passing side of the offense. I'm just lower on the consensus as a whole. The uncertainty of the quarterback position, what's Russ going to be like? I think this is offense is probably going to run the ball a lot more. They're going to play that, Pittsburgh style of football where my 32 probably looks crazy, but I think just there's guys in the same range where I don't think it's that much of a different picture. I definitely get the case. I understand.
I will
the
say
upside.
that bottom half of the screen, it feels like a lot of those guys are interchangeable.
That's
even
kind
though
of what I'm saying. Yes,
It could be a 9-spot difference. It all could be within the same tier.
right. Like, and for example, like I got Rashee Rice at 30. Like, I put Rashee Rice ahead of him. There's a lot of guys in the same range. I think that you could definitely make the case for Pickens being where you guys have him, 23.
Yeah,
21's probably a little I don't know about quite getting there, but I understand it.
I just feel like there's a very small chance that his value goes down just based on, even if he doesn't play efficiently, I just don't see a world where like you said, they're going to run more. It's like, I don't really know that they're going to run more. They were super fucking run heavy last year. And we were we're trying to hide Kenny Pickett. So if anything, like even if the amount of pass attempts stayed the same, like he produced at a high level while Deontay Johnson was taking 135, 140 targets. So I think he could swap from that 110 target guy, 105 target guy to 130, 135.
I also think some people, and I'm not necessarily saying that you're doing this, Adam, but some people associate the Arthur Smith stuff from Atlanta going to Pittsburgh, and then they think, like, I've seen people fading Najee to oblivion because they're like, well, look what he did with Cordero Patterson, and look what he did with, who is now in Pittsburgh, by the way, and all this other stuff. So it's like people are fading Arthur Smith, and by default, they're fading Pittsburgh Steelers players as well, probably unfairly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not entirely that. I'm a little afraid of the offense as a passing offense, and I just look at last year. This is a guy that, to your point, the targets could go up as far as Deontay being gone, but like he had double-digit targets twice. A lot of weeks where it's just completely unusable with a few monster spike weeks. So
it's super fair. I tend to just like give the benefit of the doubt to the inconsistency. I feel like if you look over a 5-year span, at one point or another, if a guy has like 4 good seasons, like 2 of them are inconsistent, 2 of them are consistent, where it's like weekly performers, and we tend to whatever happened the previous season is like how we look at a player. Like Tyler Lockett was completely boom or bust for a year because he had like 3 big games, and the next year he was just like averaging 13 points a game, and we're like, he's the most consistent player in fantasy. You know what I mean? Like,
no, you're right.
Those kind of narratives, as long as he's producing at a high level, I still feel good about him overall when we look back at the season. But I do echo your concerns with, even if the volume is there, this passing offense could be atrocious. Like, you're in a division with the Ravens defense, the Browns defense. I don't think the Bengals defense is really anything special, but like, just, that's 4 games a year that are going to be pretty tough. And now offenses will be completely hammering in and zoning in on a guy like George Pickens. So if he's not developing into like a real separator at this point, then we might have problems.
Sure. And I mean, I would even argue that you could go high with Russ. Whatever you think of him, Russ has actually been a pretty decent contested catch ball thrower. So, like,
that's what I mean. Like, the way he used Cortland Sutton last year.
I see range of outcomes for him.
Yeah.
I'm to the point where there's a lot of other receivers I feel, and I could end up being wrong on this, that I'm a little more easily moving at this time of year that don't carry the, I probably just am lower than consensus, so I might need to reflect
maybe I
that.
should be higher on Pickens in redraft than I am in Dynasty, just for this like perfect storm of everything kind of coming together, and
I think that's
lower
a good
him
point.
down a little bit.
Maybe.
Also, so like I'm just curious then in some of the ranges here. We went through a lot of guys. What do you think? I'm kind of curious. We're very similar on DK. I'm curious about this because we talked about A.J. Brown decent amount. DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown, going back a few years ago now, were like neck and neck, 1 and 2. We're looking at DK Metcalf is down at this 20 range, and a lot of that same sentiment of he's 27. Is he going to produce? It's not that he's not a special talent, but what's the situation around him? And is he safe in this range, or do you think he can go up, or is more likely to go down? Kind of similar conversation with other players.
I think he's safe in this range. Like, I don't really expect him to go down much more. I also don't expect him to rise really much more either. But
I think there's a path where he could rise. And same thing with JSN. It's so heavily dependent on Tyler Lockett. Like, if Lockett falls off a cliff, then I think like the narrative will be really strong because JSN and DK are such opposite players.
Yeah.
Right. And they have that new staff in there, and I think they're going to be passing the ball probably
a
lot more. So I think there's a world where it has to happen. Lockett is like the turnkey here. If Lockett just goes out and goes 925 yards again, then I feel like there's very little movement for a guy like DK Metcalf. But I think there is a case where, like, next year we're maybe talking about him as a higher ceiling player because of Lockett's departure or something like that. Yeah, even though I don't think it's likely, but I do think that is a possible path.
There's potentially a chance this year, and this is me just speaking from a fan standpoint, where we could potentially see not Geno Smith for the entire year. It could be Sam Howell at some point.
Yeah.
Does that change the way that you view, and knowing that if there is a quarterback change, there's also potentially a 2025 quarterback change as well? Like, does that worry you for a guy like DK Metcalf and even a guy like JSN, who is in here 27 for us all, but does that worry you for their long-term outlooks?
No.
Nobody likes quarterback uncertainty.
Sure, but I also don't. You know what I definitely don't like is quarterback certainty if it's going to be Geno for another 3 years.
That's fair.
Fair.
I mean, I'll give you that side of the coin. And I just think right now the case with DK is this. I think the community's, to your point, he's kind of feeling like he's getting to the cemented range because of his age. But I think Nick makes a great point. I think he could go up with production. I think the difference is Geno is not the safe. He's not the safest quarterback, frankly, for production.
No.
Sam Howell might be a boost for short-term production, but if this offense as a whole is throwing more, DK Metcalf is an explosive type of athlete and talent at the position. We've seen him have massive games. So even with middling quarterback, I think he could be decently valued in this range. But if any type of quarterback improvement plus volume goes up, he's one of the guys I actually have a decent amount of exposure to.
I just got a recent share of him in a startup, and
Where'd you get him?
want to say I got him in the 5th round.
Sounds about right, yeah.
But
he's about 5th. Maybe 6th would be a value.
The only thing that I did, and I talked about this in the comment section because me and somebody were having a conversation about it. Nico Collins and DK Metcalf, they were like right in the same tier. And in that draft with that roster, I leaned DK over Nico, even though Nico is higher in my rankings right now. But that was more so for which I felt was like risk aversion. Between the two, it felt like DK Metcalf was a safer asset than what Nico Collins is.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen Nico with the current trifecta that they have, and we've seen DK with his trifecta. Yeah. So we feel good that his floor is what he did last year.
And it felt like even with a down year from DK Metcalf last year, he was still producing somewhat similarly.
Yeah, I think though, to the point, you're definitely right on. He's more of a safe asset. Nico, though, man, the offense. I think the thing with Houston is, there's probably going to be somebody that ends up in this range of value. Like Tank Dell, somebody attached to CJ Stroud is going to be a value outside the top 15. You just pinpointing it right now.
Someone will be a value and somebody will not. Somebody will be left out entirely.
For sure.
And more than likely.
It's tough, and I think that's why I say risk aversion, because I can't confidently say. My gut tells me today it's for 2024, it'll be Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. That's what my gut tells me today.
My gut says the same thing.
But I can't say that confidently with certainty, so that's why I lean DK in that startup.
Yeah. And then DK on the flip side, when you say, okay, in Seattle, if a wide receiver disappoints, if 2 wide receivers disappoint, 10 out of 10 times, DK is not going to be probably either of those 2 answers.
That's actually pretty good.
You know what I mean? It's like JSN, you could just see it, be like, okay, he's maybe just not the player we thought he was. Tyler Lockett's getting very old, so like he just falls off. I don't think you really ever look at that equation and be like, DK is the guy that probably has the bad year.
Yep.
That's very, very well said. I think we're pretty spot on, pretty consistent here with Zay.
Can we talk about T. Higgins? Because we have him inside of our top 24, Adam. You're actually higher than me at 21. Mm-hmm. But, Nick, you don't have him in the top 24.
No, I don't. And I think –
state your case.
Yeah, I just think part of this – some of it's like the uncertainty, obviously, of what his future holds. And, I mean, I also feel like ranking him high is a little bit impractical given what he's actually produced. The guy has never hit 1,100 yards. The guy has never gone over 7 touchdowns. Like, he's entering year 5. He is, I guess, the player that I think he's just the player that he is. I don't think he's a special
wide
talent.
Receiver too.
I think he's a good wide receiver too, attached to a very, very good quarterback. And if that equation changes, then we're not looking at someone that I want to draft inside, the top 20 picks or the top 24 picks, at least in my opinion. Like, dude, I don't know. Like, look at T. Higgins' like box scores.
Yeah, I know.
They're not needle movers whatsoever in fantasy.
I'm gonna ask 2 questions here, and I guess really the first one is the worst case scenario for T. Higgins to be a wide receiver 2 on his own NFL roster like he currently is, and if he were to move a team, second question here, it would almost certainly be to be the number 1 wide receiver, right? And if that is the case, then he should see a value increase?
I mean, I don't see him. I don't think he's good enough as his own talent to be someone who's like capable of handling 160 targets and doing a really good job with them. That I think is I think like the situation he's in right now is probably like his perfect situation where he doesn't need to see the crazy coverage because he's not a speedster and he's not a guy who makes guys miss after the catch. He's like a jump ball guy, a good possession receiver. He's not a big separator. And I'm like, you got to have some of those elite talents if you're going to be an elite 1 by yourself. Yeah. So I feel like he's in the perfect situation. If he moves, I don't like it any better. Where he is, he's a good player, but nothing that gets me like overly excited.
So you feel like he's really good at a lot of things, but not elite at anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, though, that's why I have him at wide receiver 21 because, like, to the point, no question. There's only 10 guys that had over 150 targets last year. Like, it's that I don't disagree at all with that. There's not many guys, I think, out there that are truly that type of alpha talents. But I think the case for me with T. Higgins is, like, there's a lot of T. Higgins, if you look at it, okay, yeah, he was injured last year. Joe Burrow wasn't healthy the whole year. Look at his first 3 seasons, though, and tell me all these young guys that we get this hopium for. If Jordan Addison didn't give you wide receiver 24, 28, and 18, that we're not excited about that. And if you're not excited about that type of an outcome, playing that game we almost did a couple shows ago for Jordan Addison, for Jackson Smith and Jigba, like if we think those guys are going to be realistic top 12 options, we might be overvaluing them just because they're young, frankly.
Well, I have both of those guys below T. Higgins, so I'm hearing that sentiment, but like I don't know. I
mean, because for me, Zay Flowers, right? It's Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, Jordan Addison, Brian Thomas. These are the guys I have below, where it's like realistically, I think we might be overvaluing youth and projecting situation that might be unrealistic.
Maybe
that's where I have T. I think he's more cemented in the range of this area.
Yeah.
That's fair. I think if you want to go with the safety, if you want to go with the floor, I think T. Higgins is a great pick. I still think the contract situation needs to be dabbled into, because let's say he goes to another team, though. Let's say he goes to a team and he's not with Joe Burrow and not next to Jamar Chase. Do you see more places that are realistic where he gets a real value increase?
Well, if next year after cap has cleared a little bit, if he ends up as a Los Angeles Charger, how do we feel about him there?
Okay.
I like the Chargers. I think T. Higgins, I'd put it like this. I don't expect him to be jumping into the top 12 realistically, especially at the age. I just think that there's a situation where he stays, and he's a solid player. He's a wide receiver, mid-wide receiver too, which in Dynasty actually carries some weight. His name isn't sexy anymore, just straight up. But if he goes to a new situation, as the one, maybe he's not going to really jump more than a wide receiver 15 or 12 in production, but I'm getting him, even if I'm the highest of the group, at wide receiver 21 here. I feel like the floor isn't falling. I feel like people are acting like the sky's falling on T. Higgins, and it just is not. I feel like he's still produced at a middling range, and that's where I'm valuing him.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all on him as like a middling. Let's say like next year Devontae Adams is gone and he goes to like the Raiders as the one. I'm like,
sure,
that's a pretty fucking uninspiring and I think realistic maybe landing spot.
Fair.
Or if Devontae's there, either fucking one, honestly.
Honestly, though, like, I can't say that landing spot would ever make me move him down from where he's at right now. And to be honest, I feel like even if he was going to Las Vegas next year as the number one, I might bump him a couple.
Hear me on this. I mean, what if he ended up with Patty?
I mean, he's not gonna though.
Why?
I think they'll get Rashi Rice. They just drafted
Josh
Xavier
Allen.
Worthy, Marquise. Yeah, I mean, like, these are the conversations that everyone has every offseason, and it
just
literally
saying,
never
like,
happens.
If we're going to talk about all the wide ranges of outcomes, Rashee Rice is in trouble. Who knows what's actually going to happen with him off the field, how he ends up playing when he's on the field. I like the talent. I like a lot, but they still have a lot of projection, and Travis Kelce is getting older,
Do you think
too.
T. Higgins has like a 1,312 touchdown season in him?
Yes.
I think
he has
on the
the
high end range of outcomes, that would be the high end. I'm not going to say, like, yeah, that's something I'm expecting.
Yeah, all I'm saying is we have a 4-year sample size playing with Joe Burrow where we haven't really seen anything close to that.
Yeah. I mean, you have second best or third best, I guess, if you want to argue it, wide receiver in football opposite you, which is tough to stand out. And he does stand out pretty decently next to him, which I think says a lot about his talent.
No, that's fair.
I mean, he's given you so far, no.
It was 1,006 every year, pretty much.
Yeah, fair.
He misses some time, so if you want to go per game, maybe it could be better, but he misses some time.
Yeah. He was a pretty damn good one for Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, but that was a while ago.
I think, though.
Justin Ross was, too.
Bang.
True, huh?
Damn.
Too bad Justin Ross couldn't be a number one for Pat Mahomes.
Yeah. What if Justin Ross had Pat Mahomes?
What if Justin Ross
Figured
played
that
with
out.
Joe Burrow in Cincinnati instead of T. Higgins? No, I'm just kidding.
Probably even worse off.
I just think that there's a range of outcomes where he ends up in a spot we don't like. He's uninspiring. He ends up staying with Cincinnati. I think it's probably low end. And there's also definitely situations where he ends up with a very good quarterback again where Jamar Chase isn't there.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I just look at the guys who have moved successfully and also been able to move up in value after the trade. And the guys that have done that, in my eyes, have elite traits. Like Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, I wouldn't say moved up in value, but even like Tyreek Hill, all the guys that I think have moved successfully and then been as good, if not better, in the next place, have usually just been able to do it on their own and have been incredible separators and can win in very drastic different parts of the field. Where I guess I'm just not really sold that T. Higgins is that guy right now.
Yeah.
4 years in.
That's fair. I think there's definitely a case to be made that he doesn't have, to your point, elite traits. I think he's very, very above average, a very good receiver.
Sure.
I'm curious here. 24, 25, and 28, Andrew. Brian Thomas Jr. Let's start talking some rookies.
4, 25, and 28. Oh, for BTJ?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily a knock on Brian Thomas Jr. I still have him as my wide receiver 4 in the class, but I was putting him in these rankings, and I was looking at, like, guys that I would potentially draft. And I was thinking about it from, like, if I'm on the clock in a draft, what order would I be drafting these guys in? I had JSN above him. I had Deebo Samuel above him. And then that's really the only other guys in the tier that I have above him. The other guys were that tier above, which was Zay Flowers, DK Metcalf, Tank Dell, George Pickens, T. Higgins, Jordan Addison. Those are the guys. So I think more so it's just there's some question marks about his profile that we want to see develop at the NFL level. And obviously there are still some question marks about Trevor Lawrence as a elite quarterback, trying to be an elite quarterback at the NFL level. And so I just want to see it happen. I probably am putting a little bit of cushion in my ranking there because of it, but nothing that I dislike about Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay. We're pretty much in lockstep here, Nick.
Yeah, BDGE is a guy I don't necessarily have a really strong take on him. I do also see some flaws in his profile, but like he's a guy that I'm willing to gamble on in spots where I feel like I could see something.
Big time.
Yeah, like I'd take him in one draft here and maybe take the guy I have next in my rankings in the next draft here. I'm not like over the moon about him.
Yeah. One thing I think the viewers are going to want us to mention, and I didn't even notice it until just now, we don't even have inside the top 30 in our consensus Xavier Worthy. Now, I don't know if that's because Nick dragged him to the floor.
You know damn well it was because of mine.
He's 31 in mine.
I think he ended up being like maybe 31 or something.
Okay, he's 31 on my rankings.
I just think that there's going to be some big mad people that Rashee Rice is 28 in ours and Xavier Worthy's not in the top 30. But anyway, I just wanted to
we said that we had
on
the last episode. We said we had Rashee Rice over Xavier. At least you and I did.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm just saying that if we wanted to touch on how if Xavier Worthy's right on the edge of making this list, or are we?
He definitely is.
Okay.
I want to say he's probably like 31 to 33 for all of us.
Yeah, I think I
don't know
have
off the top of my head, but
I think I have him at 30. Nick's definitely might be dragging him because I think I might have him inside the top 30. But I don't know. I have George Pickens at 32. He's a top 30, 32. He's not far from this list. I think he's just outside of this range for me.
He's right out there. And then also, like, I have
Keon Coleman and him are very close to making this list for me.
Yeah, 100%. And I think my next two are probably Keon and because I have Ladd and then probably Keon, Xavier Worthy or something.
I have
shit like
Keon
that.
a little bit lower than you guys. He's still in my top 36, but he's 36.
Okay.
Biggest mover in the draft, my ass.
I mean, from where I had him.
Why do you hate the man's?
I don't think he's that
He's
good.
such a likable kid too.
He's a likable kid. I don't hate the guy.
He is
as a
actually like
person.
quickly becoming the most likable player in the NFL.
But I just think,
Facts.
I mean, we've talked about Keon Coleman. We don't got to talk about Keon Coleman too much.
The
landing spot gave
you
him.
do. We've talked quite a
The
bit.
landing spot gave him a bump, but there's so much that I don't like about his profile.
Okay, just a strong player bet then.
I'm more so with Keon Coleman at this point. I'm more so just betting on Josh Allen to elevate him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what a lot of people. It's kind of weird too with Keon. Like, if you told me he was the leading target earner this year in Buffalo, I'd probably believe you. If you told me he was 3, if you told me he was 4, I'd probably believe you. Because like Keon, I mean, they got Curtis Samuel this offseason, they got Kincaid, they got James Cook. Like, we don't really know how this fucking offense is going to look without Diggs. Like, that was their identity for a long time.
Sure.
I think Curtis Samuel, assuming a healthy season, I think he is the number one target leader in this offense. He's my bet. If I have to make a bet today, he's the guy.
That wouldn't necessarily surprise me, although I wouldn't be surprised to see him just sneak ahead of both Kincaid and Keon in targets where nobody ends up really caring.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say, like, I don't see a season long where he's like really consistent for you. He'll have a couple games where he's like 14 targets or something, and then like a 6-week fall off period.
Curtis was gonna be
ball.
on my buy sell hold. He was like an honorable mention in case you guys took one of my guys. It was gonna be Curtis Samuel.
He was a throw-in in a trade I did recently in one of my leagues, and I was fucking pumped.
wide receiver 60 or something right now on Keep Trade Cut.
He might be the GOAT. He might be the greatest.
He might be
Just
the
go buy
woke.
his ass.
Yeah.
One more thing, real quick. Quite a bit of disparity when you look at the differential here between us. I'm still, I guess, a little more buying into JSN than Nick is and than Andrew is to varying degrees. Nick at 32, are you pretty cool on him, or is it just more of a tier thing?
I think I'm going to be late on him if I'm late on him, and I'm okay with that. I'm more so betting on the fact that we're still going to be able to get him at this price this time next year.
Okay.
He might take I still think Lockett's a player. I think Metcalf's a player. I think JSN could take a step up from, what do you have, 650 yards last year? Mm-hmm. If he goes from 650 to like 800 or 900, I think you're drafting him
maybe at like where T. Higgins is. I don't think that's that big of a price increase. And if I'm like, I liked what I saw this year, then I'm willing to pay the price next year for it.
I feel like that, though, if that happens, I would say half of the people that were in on him this year are going to then leave. They won't want to be a part of that anymore, even if it's just 800.
What?
Like,
yeah. I like. Okay. Do you range of outcomes for JSN this year? Do you see him blowing up? Like, in order for him to get to where like Jalen Waddle is, he's going to need 1,100, 1,200 yards this year. I don't really see that out of him. Like, look at the guys in the top 15. All of them have had standout fucking seasons.
And I'm agreeing with you because you're right. That is what he's going to need to do if he wants to make that happen.
If he wants to get up there. Yes. So I'm saying, like, I think like best case scenario, maybe he hits 1,000, and then you might have to pay a little bit more of a significant price. But I would rather wait the year, pay a little bit of a bump where it's like wide receiver 20, knowing what I saw at that time, than pay that price right now, hoping that he becomes the player that we want to. So I'm more pessimistic just because I think I'd rather try buying him lower next year, and if I can't, I'm okay missing the boat.
I hear you. I kind of actually agree with that statement as well, and that's probably why I have him at 27. But
if he falls to me in a startup draft at good value, like I'm not against taking him, but like I'm not where you are, where I'm like it almost feels like at 23. I don't know what his consensus is overall, like market wise.
Yeah,
but I'm not about to like take him a half round or a round earlier than where the market is.
So he's wide receiver 25 on KTC.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm two spots up,
and I'm too low, and
I
that puts him in the tier with Jordan Addison and Brian Thomas, and I feel like they're all the same bet right now.
The thing for me with it is that I feel like right now, because of production, because of recency bias, it feels like the cool thing to do is act like people really weren't that high on JSN.
Oh, I was.
But everyone at this point, and I shouldn't say everyone, but a large majority of people feel like they're very starting to cool, and the market is as a whole. But I think that just the offense in general that Pete Carroll was running with Geno at the helm, like who the fuck's really breaking out in that situation? He's a couple catches. He had a touchdown that got overturned versus Dallas. Like he's a couple plays from being in the 700, 800 yard range where we're talking totally different about him. I think this offense is going to be throwing the ball. Definitely, I'm saying at 23 that I'm more wanting to be a part of if it does happen for him. I think that he has a lot to gain because I think people will go back to that reminiscing. It's all coming back to me now, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess like I have a tough time talking myself into because Lockett and Metcalf have been primarily outside receivers, it still feels like JSN is a slot guy where it's like if they don't play through wide receiver sets at a really high pace or straight up they just say JSN is better than Lockett at this point, which I'm not like willing to really bet on that right now. Like I don't know how clear the path is for him to like really build on last year to a super high degree.
I think to that point though, watching Penix, watching Washington, watching the OC coming over from there, Pete Carroll versus this offense, I think the three wide receiver sets about to be gigantically different.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is
McMillan for sure.
And I think that the other thing that you mentioned is I am willing to say that while listen, it's been a great ride with Tyler Lockett, he ain't the reason that JSN's not going to succeed. In my estimation. So those to the point you actually.
It's not even really about succeeding. It's just holding him off for one more year.
Yeah.
No,
but then
fair.
It gets into the conversation where, like, okay, so this goes right. He does take the number 2, and he's involved in everything. But then we get into the conversation we had with DK where it's like, okay, now you have Geno Smith, and you have potentially Sam Howell, and then potentially another guy. Like, those are question marks as well.
But I think that's where, to the point you made, Nick, about if JSN has 1,000 yards, what are we really saying? If JSN has 1,000 yards and takes over the clear number 2 or is right there neck and neck target-wise or just behind DK, and we say, man, but he didn't even have a quarterback.
See, but in my eyes, that's his best case scenario. Like we're saying, like, oh, he has 1,000 yards, takes over number 2. I'm like, yeah, but like a lot of things have to work right for that to happen.
I don't think it's that drastic.
I don't think it's likely.
So you said Waddle. You said to get up into the Waddle range, but like,
which me or Nick?
He did.
I did.
Yeah, but is there a real chance that he flips and takes over DK Metcalf at this point?
Well,
that's not the Waddle range though.
That was the.
What you're talking about 2021.
Saying, like,
yeah.
If he goes and has 900, 1,000, whatever it is,
sure.
But he's the number 2. You said he's the clear number 2 to DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I was
saying. Can
we
really put him above DK Metcalf if he's the clear number 2?
I think people will.
I think the people were already doing it last year.
It means by DK.
He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to outproduce DK to
pass him in Dynasty.
Yes.
DK was ranked.
That's the way Dynasty works.
This time last year, without production, based on the name and where people were associating JSN, go check the KTC receipts.
I know.
He was ahead of DK.
Yeah. Oh, I had him.
So, like, we don't even need to see.
Right.
We need to see literally nothing to put him ahead of DK.
I have a receipt.
People did it with 0.
I have a receipt that I did on one of my Show the Receipts episode where I said by midseason, JSN will have surpassed Tyler Lockett, and by the end of the year, he'll be competing with DK for the number 1 receiver role. Wow. And that did not happen. But that tells you where it was.
I kind of feel like that was the sentiment, though, for most people, which it wasn't a crazy take whatsoever. It was like Lockett was getting older, and you just assume like you use your first pick in the draft on JSN. It's like you have that, that plan in place for him to immediately kind of take it over, or at least by the second half of the year. And it just felt like it was just off all year. It just like never really happened. We waited for it. Like any false hope we got, like, oh, he went 4 for 60. Like this is when it wasn't there. And I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I just feel like hoping for the high end feels like the only way that he has a jump in value, to the point where I feel like, fuck, I really missed out. Where I feel like most likely his value will go up because he'll produce better than he did last year. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it'll go to the point where it's like much higher than like a Zay Flowers is right now. And I'm like, okay, if I like JSN from last year, like I'm willing to pay the 2019 even price.
Yeah.
No, I could look stupid saying it, but like,
fair.
What a deal. All right, we'll wrap up there.
Jackson, Smith, and Jigba.
Jackson Smith, hit the like fucking button. You commenters,
stop acting like we're number
laundry.
3.
Yeah, stop acting like
motherfuck the big 3.
Jackson Smith, subscribe, motherfucker.
Facts.
Sorry.
Jackson, subscribe to Jigba.
Take us out of here.
Take us out.
Jackson Smith, peace out of here.
Thank.